This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of July 23rd, 2023. Content authenticity statement: 100% of this newsletter was generated by me, the human. You will, actually, no, there's no AI at all in this newsletter. I mean, the topics about it, none of it's made by AI. What's on my mind this week? AI, South Park, and llamas. This week, let's cover two important developments in the world of AI as I prepare to head for Cleveland to speak at the annual Marketing AI Conference, MACON, which, by the way, you can get, there's like 80 seats left. If you want to get tickets, there's a link in the newsletter for it. You get $150 off the ticket price, but there's like 80 seats left. Anyway, first, let's talk about South Park, the TV show. Fable Studios, which is an AI development and research shop, released a paper this week, which I don't think it's been peer-reviewed yet, so as with all such papers, take it with a grain of salt until it has passed the peer review process. But they used an ensemble of AI systems to completely replicate an episode of the TV show South Park. The system, called Show One, Showrunner Agents, it's an ensemble of different AI systems. There's a language model, there's a generative imaging model, there's a voice generation model. So it's this whole network of things. In fact, we can put the graphic right here. This is the architecture of the system overall. The episode itself, from a consumer perspective, and I don't watch a whole lot of South Park, but people who commented on the original LinkedIn post said that it was an episode of South Park. So the episode itself was okay. Not particularly funny, but it does capture the spirit well enough that if you saw it come up on the viewing device of your choice, you might assume that the writers just had a bad day and produced an episode that was kind of a stinker. It was South Park, clearly, just wasn't the usual fare. This is the Turing test of entertainment. Shown a piece of content, can a consumer, you or me, tell whether it was machine generated or not? And more important, would the average consumer care? This episode passes the Turing test of entertainment. Right? If you read the paper and you watch the demonstration video, which I encourage you to do, a couple of notable points should leap out. One, the accuracy is very, very good. It looks like South Park. Right? Because the system operators used OpenAI models, the script they produced, the episodes, they were mildly amusing, but not the usual coarse dialogue, not the usual South Park fare, right? Had they used an open source model, like one of the many storyteller or role play models that are totally uncensored, they probably would have gotten much more South Park-like humor generated, the kind of humor that, that doesn't need explanation. Second, and this was mind-blowing, it took their ensembled system a total of 3 hours and 15 minutes to assemble a 22-minute episode of South Park. For anyone who has ever worked in entertainment or known anyone who's worked in entertainment, this is absolutely mind-blowing. You can't even get a writer's room to agree on a plot in 3 hours, much less produce an entire episode from start to finish. Now, granted, this does not take into account the training time it took them to build the stable diffusion models. They took 1,200 characters and 600 background images to train the model. And that takes a couple of days with modern GPUs, graphics processing units. However, training models like that in a production process, that's a one-time upfront cost. Once the model's trained, you don't need to do it again, unless it starts generating like really unsatisfactory outputs. But for the most part, once you've built the models and tuned them, you're off to the races. 3 hours and 15 seconds, start to finish. The implications for the entertainment industry should be pretty obvious, right? For a templated, systematic show like South Park or The Simpsons or Futurama or Game of Thrones, right? For which there's ample training data. In some cases, like The Simpsons, there's decades of content. Machines are perfectly capable of producing more of it. Right? A truly original show would still need to be human-powered because the training data simply would not exist, right, in any sufficient quantity to have a machine make more of the same. But for a franchise with like 3 to 5 seasons worth of content, it's more than just realistic for a machine to just keep going and keep cranking out more of the same. From a technical sophistication level, it's unsurprising South Park was so easy to recreate. It is not exactly, shall we say, complex imagery or animation, right? Compared to like live action or even, any better produced cartoon, but that's kind of the point. It's still a heck of an accomplishment. It's even more stunning when you consider that the models used to manufacture this episode are basically toddlers, right? Stable Diffusion, which is one of the underlying models, was released a little bit more than a year ago, about a year and a half now. Can you imagine having an 18-month-old child who went from finger painting with whatever food you gave them to drawing commercial animation by their first birthday? I can't. But that's exactly what has happened here and exactly how fast the technology is moving. There's a bigger lesson here for all of us, not just folks in the entertainment industry. Ensembled systems, like the Show One system, are inherently more capable than a single big system. By this, we mean a collection of top-performing point solutions glued together that's going to outperform an all-in-one system. This matters because a lot of people think AI systems, like a chat GPT, should be these monolithic magicians capable of doing everything and anything in one tool. And that's just not the case, right? Just as you'd probably find a vehicle that tried to combine the features of a pickup truck, a U-Haul, a sports car, and an SUV to be less than satisfactory, the same is true of the average consumer's expectations and understanding what AI systems are. You're going to be better off. The reality is, if you're playing an AI strategy, plan from the start to have it be an ensembled system, a system made up of different tools, some of which are AI, some of which are complicated generative models, some of which aren't even AI, chained together so that they work in harmony in the same way that different appliances in a kitchen are used for the right purposes at the right times by a master chef. This also saves an enormous amount of time, energy, and budget. Again, you don't have to try to invent one single monolithic solution. You can instead assemble best-of-breed point solutions that are orchestrated together, which means much less reinventing the wheel or coercing language models to attempt tasks they're simply not good at. So, that was big news point of the week number one, and that's still a pretty big point, right? But there's even bigger news. Point two, Meta, aka Facebook's parent company. I still call it Facebook, Meta, whatever. Meta released the second version of its LLaMa language model this week. And as promised, LLaMa 2 is commercially licensed. Its performance is significantly better than its predecessor and so good that on many common AI benchmarks, it scores as well as OpenAI's GPT 3.5 Turbo, the default model that powers ChatGPT. This is a really, really big deal. It's a huge deal. So let's talk through why. When you look at benchmark scores, LLaMa 2 is objectively amazing for the open source family of models, MPT, Falcon, etc. Comparing within families, like all 7B models, all 30B models, etc., LLaMa 2 beats out most other models on most benchmarks, sometimes really handily. And there are even instances where it does better than the next family up. LLaMa 2 13B beats MPT 30B in a fair number of cases, and even Falcon 40B. That's huge. Now, if you're unfamiliar and like, what is he talking about? The XB notation is the number of parameters for a model. 13B is 13 billion parameters. 30B is 30 billion parameters. What's a parameter? If language models were Subway sandwiches, the sandwich shop Subway, some people call them like hoagies or things like that, but they're large sandwiches. If language models were Subway sandwiches, the number of parameters would be the density of the toppings, right? If you ever go into the Subway app and there's like green peppers and lettuce and olives, and you can choose, light, medium, or heavy. Parameters are a trade-off of accuracy and speed. So if you have a 7B model of LLaMa, that's like the LLaMa model, the LLaMa sandwich with like a very few, a couple of olives and a little bit of lettuce, and that's it. And like the LLaMa 70B would they have like piles of lettuce on the sandwich, right? The sandwich would be this tall. Parameters are a trade-off of accuracy and speed. The more parameters, 13B, 70B, 30B, the more parameters, the better the model's accuracy, but the slower the model tends to be. A 7B model will reply like really fast in a chat like that. A 70B model, you'd be like, I have time for an actual Subway sandwich, right? And this makes sense. Think of actual Subway sandwiches. Less dense toppings means you get your sandwich faster, but it's less satisfying because there's less toppings on it. So why is this a big deal? Because LLaMa 2, for across all categories, makes a better sandwich faster. Right? So its medium topping sandwich is as good as another model's large topping sandwich, right? So in this analogy, you're getting a better sandwich faster. Right? And that is a big trade-off. That is a big trade-off that you don't have to make anymore. These open source foundation models are starting to challenge the closed source models as well, right? Meta's benchmarks show that Llama 2 meets OpenAI's GPT 3.5 on quality. Now, GPT 4, sort of, we'll talk about this on Monday's podcast, but GPT 4 still remains king of the hill for now, but Meta's models are catching up really, really fast. I just saw a Llama 2 7B Cherry model for coding that is doing really, really well, right? And better than GPT 3.5, which is pretty interesting. So Meta's models are catching up really fast. And with the power of the open source community, they have tens of thousands of developers on their side tweaking and tuning the foundation models for all kinds of use cases. As we've discussed previously, this was a couple issues ago now, the newsletter, open source models are incredibly valuable for any company wanting to deploy generative AI, especially inside their own software, Photoshop or Microsoft Word or Google Chrome. Open source models are super valuable. One of the biggest challenges of enterprise software management is version control. If you're a big company, when you want to roll out a piece of software to thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of employees around the world or millions of customers, you want software that does what it's supposed to do under normal operating conditions. And you need that software to do so in a reliable manner for years, right? For years. There's a reason why computers in production systems and in companies are often far behind, even on a basic operating system level, compared to the same operating system on consumer hardware, right? A company can't afford to have unreliable software spread across the planet. So you go to work at Cisco Systems or IBM or whatever, and they're running Windows 8. Why? When Windows 11 is out? Because they need it to be reliable. They need to be proven in that environment. And these software life cycles are measured in years. Windows 10 is the dominant operating system on PCs. According to StatCounter, 71% of Windows installs are Windows 10. Right? That was released in 2015. That's 8 years ago, but it's still the dominant system. Why? Because it's reliable. When you look at the life cycles of models, of AI models provided by a company like OpenAI, you will notice that their life cycles for models are very fast in an enterprise context. They just recently announced, OpenAI just recently announced the end of life for all their older models. It was GPT-3, all the GPT-3 models, requiring everyone to move from completions to the chat completions API by January of next year, which is 6 months from now. This is less than a year after making chat completions available. A year is a long time in AI, to be sure, right? A week is a long time in AI. But it's the blink of an eye in enterprise software. For some large companies, it might take 2 years to roll out a piece of software across the company. Can you imagine having to roll out a major code update mid-rollout because the AI vendor just changed their minds? That's why LLaMa is a big deal. When you have a piece of software, the LLaMa model, you can download and run it on your own equipment. That's a big deal. It means you have control over versioning. You have control over rollout. Facebook could hand out LLaMa 3 tomorrow, but you have that LLaMa 2 model. You have control over the user experience to a much greater extent because you and your corporate IT department decide when the new versions get distributed. Meta's LLaMa 2 rollout means you could implement a large language model in your company, the interface in your company, and securely distribute local copies throughout your company and be assured of its stability until you're ready to upgrade on your own timetable. Right? We've all had that experience very recently where a company said, hey, this is our timetable and you get to live with it, right? We all upgraded to Google Analytics 4. Boy, wasn't that a joy. We didn't have control of that timetable. It wasn't under our control. By giving away LLaMa as a open source model, Facebook, Meta, is giving us that control. That's a big deal. That is a deal maker for a lot of companies where previously they were looking at OpenAI and these other companies saying that's a deal breaker. Right? We don't have control over this. Now it's a deal maker. The second point in LLaMa 2's favor is that until your application reaches, I think it's 700 million users, something like that, per the licensing terms, it's free to use. If you've ever wondered why the Android operating system is in nearly every mobile device, why it's the dominant mobile operating system, it's because Google made the decision to give it away as open source software, and pretty much everyone ran with it. Right? It's like 70% market share, something crazy like that. Meta is following the same playbook. Give away high quality software knowing it will rapidly become the standard. This also democratizes access to large language models. People who can't afford OpenAI or Anthropic's fees for their APIs, particularly in like developing nations, can make use of LLaMa's near state-of-the-art performance for free. That means all the capabilities of the free version of ChatGPT are now in the hands of everyone on the planet, no credit card needed. So why? Why did Meta do this? Well, first, it means a lot of innovation on their model. Because of the nature of open source software, they essentially put hundreds of thousands of developers around the planet on their team working for free to make improvements on the software. And those developers share, by the licensing terms, share those improvements, and Meta can go and say, cherry pick and say, oh, that one's a nice one, let's bring that back in-house, right? Meta benefits from all the free labor that people are putting into these models and the innovations that people are doing with these things that their developers probably didn't even think about. And second, and this is really important, it prevents AI dominance of any one company. Meta sees the existential threat that big providers like OpenAI and Google and such present, right? That's a big threat if all the AI is in one company. If Meta can release open source models that become de facto standards like Android, they don't have to worry that eventually they'll have to become OpenAI customers, right? Because they will have the best models, they're open source, they're free, and they won't be locked into somebody else's ecosystem. Within the first 24 hours of letting LLaMa 2 out in the wild, there were already 301 derivatives made by open source developers on the Hugging Face AI model site. That is crazy, right? Can you imagine releasing a new product and having other people for free release 300 new versions of your product tuned for specific use cases? That's huge. For us, as consumers and as businesses, the release of LLaMa 2 is a watershed moment because it means we can incorporate the model's various versions into our own products without worrying about licensing or fees, and these things will work without internet access. We can build one of the most capable models into every software package imaginable: accounting software, web developer software, video game software. These models are super good at dialogue in video games. Can you imagine a video game that was open-ended like an MMO, like World of Warcraft, where you could talk to the characters and what you got back would not be scripted? You could have a real conversation in a tavern in World of Warcraft. Wouldn't that be a different kind of video game experience? You can put it in movie-making software. Any place where a natural language interface would be helpful, LLaMa can be there as part of the toolkit. With LLaMa 2's release, expect to see a language model interface in just about every piece of commercial software imaginable. And any software company not integrating it is going to be left behind very, very quickly. Because it's open source and freely downloadable, we can also download it and fine-tune it with any number of cutting-edge techniques to make it extremely good at specific tasks. We might use fine-tuning techniques to strip away abilities we don't need, like telling jokes, and make room to do a better job of picking stocks or entering medical record data or detecting stress in a customer's writing style. LLaMa 2's architecture is well suited to fine-tuning, and because it's a piece of code you install on your computer, you have a lot of control over the tuning process too. It is difficult to overstate, although I'm trying with my enthusiasm, but it is difficult to overstate the impact this model and its successors will have on the world of large language models and generative AI. For the technically savvy folks, it is imperative that you get good at working with models like these, because the ask will come sooner or later from your stakeholders to implement a language model in your products and services, including customer care, the chatbot on your website. And these models will deliver quality work at nearly no additional cost. For the regular business user, the non-technical person, or the consumer, you can and should expect to see language models embedded in everything. So, understanding prompt engineering, learning prompt engineering is critical to making the most of them in all the software you can use. It'll be in your email software. It'll be in your calendar. Learn how to write prompts for these kinds of models so that when that little chat box appears in your favorite piece of software, you are ahead of the crowd. You are ahead of your fellow employees. They'll be like, what does this box do? And you'll be like, let me show you how to 2x your productivity. You can be that person. Crafted and used intelligently and responsibly, these new models and new technologies herald greater capabilities, greater augmentations than ever before. Imagine being able to talk to nearly anything and get intelligible answers, right? Imagine being able to hold meaningful conversations with machines that are as fluent as conversations you hold with the average stranger. Can you imagine sitting at a bus stop and talking to the actual bus stop? Like, hey, when's the bus going to be here? And it will understand you. It will understand what you're trying to say and be able to respond in kind. We are witnessing the acceleration into the intelligence revolution, an age where humans, like you and me, are augmented and powered by our machines. This is your time to shine, your time to be one of the leaders in the intelligence revolution as a developer, a manager, a creator, augmented by AI. The future is now. What else happened this week? Well, let's take a look at the rest of the news. I've got a new book. It's at the top of the newsletter. It's called The Woefully Incomplete Book of Generative AI. It's free, and the reason it's free is it's basically a bunch of newsletter pieces on AI put in a semi-logical order and put together as an ebook. Now, if you are a diligent reader of this newsletter, I mean diligent, you read everything top to bottom, you don't bother getting the book because you've already read it all. If you have not been a diligent reader, or you just want it all in one place for convenience, go get it. It is free of financial cost. There is a form to download, but that's it. I'm not charging money for this one because I said in the intro of the book, this space is changing so fast that trying to write a comprehensive book on generative AI, it's a fool's errand right now. As I was putting the intro to the half-assed book together, LLaMa 2 came out. I'm like, well, I'll put that in the intro. So go get your copy of the Woefully Incomplete Book of Generative AI. This week on the live stream, too, I did an episode with Katie and John on Claude 2 and Whisper and my workflow for turning conference calls and YouTube videos into content. Now, we walk through step by step, so go watch it. Towards the end of the video, I dropped a sales technique. I didn't mean to do that, but I gave away a sales technique of something I'm working on that works really, really, really well for building a buyer persona and then using AI to validate your sales copy with your AI-driven buyer persona. So go check it out. It's a fun watch. Other things this week in the news that I was doing, I did a piece on the entertainment industry's reckoning with AI. They are not prepared for what is about to come. So go check that out. Had a piece on over-reliance of AI in business, untapped use cases, tons and tons of stuff. Other things, classes, Google Search Console for Marketers, the course that we did about a year ago, just added a new chapter, a whole new 30-minute chapter in that course on the impact of AI on SEO and what to look for in Google Search Console. So if you've already bought the course, go back in it because there's a whole new chapter now that you can take. And if you haven't bought it, well, now you get the extra bonus of having this chapter and not having it, be a surprise. Go check that out. Let's check for jobs this week. We have data analyst at Demandbase, digital marketing data analyst at Digitech, digital strategy manager at Nasuni, head of data science at Demandbase. That's pretty cool. Implementation specialist at Buy a Gift, marketing coordinator at the Well Project, marketing operations specialist at ProService Hawaii, Martech solutions engineer at Zion, performance media specialist at Seek, product marketing director at Demandbase, senior data engineer at Demandbase, vice president strategic business development at Demandbase. Wow, Demandbase is really hiring. Well, they make some cool software, so that's good. Senior digital analyst at Brain Lab. So lots and lots of stuff. As I mentioned, I'm going out to Cleveland to do the opening keynote at the MACON conference. If you want that talk brought to your company, there's a link in the newsletter to do that as well. Let's take a look at what else is happening this week. We have Norway banning behavioral ads on Facebook and Instagram. No surprise there. Affirmative action rulings affecting the business community via the Institute for Public Relations. Enterprise leaders feeling pressure to implement more AI, but haven't the foggiest idea how. No surprise there. How to verify your SEO recommendations using Chrome developer tools, which I spend a lot of time on. We also have Google's AI helping doctors decide whether to trust diagnoses made by AI. Interesting. ChatGPT rolled out custom instructions this week, which everyone's making a big deal of. And again, the open source models have had this for a while, these system level prompts. So the closed source makers are catching up to what open source is doing, which is why all the cool stuff is going to be happening on the open source side of things, so they're worth paying attention to. We have Facebook Conversions API using GA4 web tags with Simo Hava's blog. Some new stuff from IBM, generative AI on AWS with life sciences, and the new Watson X system, which is pretty cool. And then other stuff from this week. Just it's been a weird week, month, year for climate change, and there's a lot of articles in there. Upcoming events, like I said, MACON coming, then Content Jam, ISBM, Content Marketing World, Marketing Analytics and Data Science, Marketing Process B2B Forum, and just booked Social Media Marketing World in February of 2024. I got to add that to the calendar. So if you're going to be at any of these events, say hi. You'll find me easily. I'm usually the one wearing the crazy mask. But that's the news for this week. What a week. And it just keeps getting crazier every week. Thank you for being here, for listening or watching or reading. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you next time. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.